Hey guys, it's Drew. Thank you for checking out the Sober Fix podcast, where we talk about addiction and living life sober, one day at a time. If you like what you hear, go ahead and follow us. And if you get some time, check out our Instagram page at the Sober Fix podcast, and also our YouTube and TikTok at the Sober Fix. Hope you enjoy the episode. Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Drew from the Sober Fix podcast. We are here, another episode, season 2, episode 18. And it's always good. It's always fun to have guests on that are in recovery, fun people to talk to, because we get it. We all can support each other, and we know what it was like to be stuck in addiction and climb our way out and start to enjoy life sober and build a sober network and kind of do this together. We always say it's a program of we instead of I, and I have found that to be true. Super excited today. We've got Micah S. on, owner of Sobersun, sober clothing company. Micah, how you doing, man? What is your sobriety date?
I'm great, man. My sobriety date is September 7th, 2021. So a little over 3 years now.
That's awesome, man. Congratulations on that. Take us back to the beginning. What was it like? How did you start to find drugs or alcohol? What was that like for you?
Man, it really started when I was probably in middle school, towards 8th grade, when I was leaning towards, 15, 16 years old, when I could start to drive. There was that kind of sense of that freedom. And growing up, I was kind of I had a great childhood. My parents were divorced when I was real young. So there was that feeling of difference. I felt different because back then, unfortunately, divorce wasn't as often as it is nowadays. And so as a kid, I really didn't understand why everybody else could live with their mom and dad, and I had to go see my mom and dad on separate, days of the week. So there was that deep feeling of, okay, I'm different than everyone. And so growing up, man, I tried to fit in a lot with a lot of people. I tried to be somebody that I wasn't. And so when I got to middle school, when the drugs and the alcohol were kind of in me or around me in the group that I was with, it was more of okay, if I don't do this, I'm going to be super different now. So I've got to learn how to fit in with this group that I'm hanging out with. And actually the first time that I, smoked marijuana was with my cousins. And in fact, he is in recovery as well. He just celebrated, I think, 4 or 5 years now. And so I remember we were playing disc golf, and, it was just that feeling of like, I'm the only one that's not doing it. And, I've got to do it. I've got to see what it feels like just to try it, that one time. And sure enough, man, it's that cliche saying of, I took that first hit, and there was just that feeling of like, oh, wow, this is what I've been looking for since I was 5 years old. This is what I've been looking for my whole life, man. This makes me feel whole. This makes me feel like I am where I'm supposed to be. And so, going through high school, I was kind of the guy that, if you wanted to have a good night or a good party night, you hung out with me, because I always had the drugs, I always had the alcohol, and I didn't stop, man. And it was that feeling of wanting to be popular. It was that feeling of, accept me for the actions that I'm doing instead of accept me for who I am. And the guys around me that I hung out with, that's all they did too, was, they drank, they smoked, we did all kinds of drugs, we did all kinds of drinking together. And I really felt like they were my homies, that they were my boys. And I remember in 2017, when I went to rehab at TLR, the last resort down here in Texas, there was a counselor of mine, and I'd been dating this one girl for about 5.5 years at the time. They were a big enabler in my life. We were living together on her dad's property, but we were in our own house. And so we could do whatever we wanted, rent free, didn't matter what it was. We could do whatever we wanted, whenever we wanted. And so there was a big enabler of mine. And I remember in rehab, as I went there, I was like, man, I wonder what my friends are going to say when I get out. Are they going to accept me now that they know that I've been to rehab, and now that they know that I'm trying to get sober? Like, what are they going to have to say? And that was a real worry of mine in rehab was, oh no, like now I'm really different. There was that kind of took me back to whenever I was a kid. Like, okay, like I thought I was different. Now I'm really different because the guys that I'm hanging out with aren't going to rehab. I know they're still out there using. I know they're still out there drinking, and they're doing it without me. So there was that feeling of being left out. There was that feeling of being different. There was that feeling of, that fear of not being accepted anymore too. And so I remember my counselor sat me down and he asked me to name 3 things that I knew about my girlfriend at the time. And I couldn't name a single thing. I couldn't name her favorite color. I couldn't name her favorite candy. I couldn't name anything. And I'd been with this young lady for, 5.5 years. And he told me, he goes, tell me about your friends. And I could tell him their name. That's all I could really tell him. I could tell him, what their name was, where they lived, and what they liked to do. But other than that, I didn't know anything about them. The only thing that we had associated together was the drinking and the using. And so there was that feeling of like, okay, what do I do now? Like, okay, wow, like I really don't know who I'm hanging out with anymore. And I really thought I did. And so that was kind of the first really spiritual experience that I had in rehab. Was like, okay, I really need to take this stuff seriously. And that was the first month of rehab. And then the second month of rehab, it was kind of that uphill, those rose-colored glasses, that pink cloud was following me around. I was like, yay, like this is great. I love being sober. Screw those guys. Like, I don't need them anymore. Like, I'm going to do this on my own. I'm going to find new friends and I'm going to fit in with another group. But even in that, like, there was still that feeling of like trying to fit in. And I still wasn't accepting myself for who I really was. Like, I wasn't accepting myself as an addict and alcoholic. And I wasn't accepting the fact that I was allergic to alcohol or drugs. Like, I just wasn't. I thought going to rehab, they were going to, teach me how to drink and use normally, like, like a regular person. And even though like my cousin's in recovery and my uncle's in recovery as well, so it runs in the family, like I knew there was a possible chance that I was an addict and alcoholic. I knew that where I was there for a reason. And when I went to rehab, man, I was court ordered. I was on probation. I had just gotten arrested a couple months prior for, an MIP and paraphernalia. And that was a scene that I'll never forget. My mom, doing this on the cop car, and, with everything that was going on, she still had the strength to tell me it's going to be okay. And man, I replay that image all the time in my life. And that was back in 2017, man. That was a long time ago. And I still remember that. And I remember in rehab, I was like, okay, this is, whether I'm finishing probation or not, like I need to take this seriously. And that was the second month. And then the third month came around and I started kind of having that complacency of, I got this, I can get out of rehab, I can do my work, and I can still drink responsibly. Like, there was that, okay, I've heard of everybody not drinking and doing recovery. What about drinking and recovery? Like, what is that? Has anybody tried that before? And that's who I was. Like, I was the guy that was going to push the limits, man. Like you tell me I'm not going to do something, I'm going to go do it. And so the whole time in rehab, I was thinking, I literally thought there was some trap door that they would go under when we all went to sleep, and they'd go down there and they would just party and they would just wake up super early, have long enough time for their, hangover to cure away until they came in front of us. I was like, man, I know y'all secret. Like, I know what y'all are doing right now. Like, I really didn't believe that these guys were sober for, as long as they were. I really didn't believe that was possible. And that was kind of a moment that I was sitting there and I was like, okay, maybe there is something wrong with me. Maybe, the fact that I'm still obsessing over how I'm going to drink or how I'm going to use, or how am I going to do this and still drink. And, it was just that, I was planning a relapse already in rehab, in my third month in, and I'd gotten out of rehab. I was there for 90 days. I went to a sober living for 2 weeks, and I called the girlfriend that I was with, that I'd broken up with in rehab, through a letter, and I'd called her back up and I said, come get me. I need help. And so she, sure enough, enabled me again, and she came and picked me up. We went back to her house, and within 3 days, I was drunk again. But at that time, it was, my mind was telling me, as long as I stay away from the drugs, I can drink as much as I want. And as long as I'm praying to a higher power, I can drink as much as I want. As long as I'm going to church, as long as I'm trying to help people. Like, I was literally trying to do recovery while drinking. It really was. And in my prayers, like I was praying every night, but it was the same prayer, word for word, every night. Like it was it was the false hopes. It was the half measures avail us nothing. Like it was, I don't even think it was half, man. It was probably like a quarter, really. Like literally, it was a 10-word sentence, and it was, thank you, God, for today. Thank you for another opportunity. Thank you for this day. And I hope tomorrow's good. And that was it. Like that was the prayer that I prayed every single night. And I thought just because I said those words every night that I was like, okay, I'm good. Like God's got my back. Like I'm golden. I'm covering. I can still drink. Like I may be an addict, but I'm not an alcoholic. Like, and that was just kind of like, that was the disease of like telling me like, hey, no, you're okay. You got this. Like you can do this. And so that went on for a couple months. And I got right back into drugs again. But then there was a moment in my life where, things started to kind of clear up. Like they say in the big book is, there's period lengths of sobriety. There was a moment where I didn't go back to rehab. I wasn't sober, but I broke up with this girlfriend, and I moved back home with my parents, and it was a good moment of life. It was almost like a glimpse of hope. Like, okay, I'm here. Like I just made a big move. This is a very good move. This is a smart move. Okay, I'm doing good now. I'm doing good. Like I deserve the drinking. I deserve to do what I'm doing. So I moved back home. And then at around 2019, I met my wife that is now, or the lady that is now my wife. And I remember I was drinking pretty heavily at that time. I wasn't doing drugs, but I was me not doing drugs, the drinking was overcompensating for sure. But I knew that she didn't know anything about addiction or alcoholism. So that was kind of my way of manipulating her, of just letting her know, like, hey, I'm a party animal. Like I go big or go home. Like, and I still had a full-time job. Like I've never been fired from a job because of drugs or alcohol. I've never showed up drunk. I have all these yets to fill, really. I don't have a DUI. I don't have any of that. Which is another accountability reason for me why I need to stay sober nowadays, because I know those yets are still out there. And so she met me, and I would say I brought out the monster in her, the real her in her, because, I used to take her out all the time. And, at the beginning, she was all for it because she didn't know what that lifestyle was. So to her, it was kind of like a new lifestyle. And again, there was that fear of being accepted is like, okay, if I'm the only one drinking this relationship, is she going to accept me? So my mind told me, I'm going to force her to accept me by forcing her to drink and forcing her to go out and party with me. I'm going to make her feel like she's alone. So the only way that she has to join is by drinking with me. And that was, that was my master manipulation plan right there. And sure enough, like it happened. Like she was drinking a lot. I was drinking a lot. We were having, lots of party nights, lots of party days. Like it was to the point where she really didn't know who she was at one point. And there was a time where she finally stopped kind of drinking. And she finally asked me one day, she was like, can we just have a night where we don't drink? And I thought that was the craziest thing for anybody to say ever. And I was like, without drinking, man? Like, what does that look like? Like the last time I had that was in rehab. Like, I don't want to go back to rehab. Like, what is this? Like, and it was just it was almost a spiritual experience that I didn't realize, that I was just too, my Jekyll and Hyde took over, and, I was too blind to see what was really going on. And so then that's when the game started happening. That's when I started having to hide it. That's when I started having to, be discreet about it. And there were a couple of tough, rough times in our relationship. And then right about the 15-month mark, is when I proposed to her. And I remember that night we had a whole big night planned for her that she didn't know about. And we'd gone to a restaurant, and then we'd go to a bar, and then we'd go to this Mozart light show, which is something that we do every year. And I remember my friend telling me, like, hey man, you need to control yourself tonight, because if you get up on that stage and you propose and you can't talk, she's going to say no. And dude, it was probably one of the hardest things I've done in my life, is to be able to control myself that night. Like I'd have a beer and I'd be like, man, I want 6 more. But like, there was that moment of like, don't do it. Like, don't do it. And I believe that was my sobriety talking to me at that time, even though I didn't see it. Because all this time that I was drinking, I knew what I was doing. I knew that I needed to be sober. I knew that I was on the run. Like, I knew what I was doing was not right. That's why I wanted to do it, because I knew it wasn't right. Like, I wanted to do the things that people said I couldn't do so I could prove to them, like, no, watch this. Like, I'm going to prove to you. And it just never worked. And so luckily I held my tolerance that night, which was good and bad, because the fact that I held my tolerance that night, my mind kind of took over. My mind told me, like, see, you can do it. Like, go ahead. Like, see, you only had one beer tonight, or you had two beers, or, you weren't drunk on the floor by the end of the night. Like, that was a dagger in my sobriety from my disease. Like, at that time, my disease and my sobriety were going head to head, man. And that night my disease won, because it told me, like, see what you can do. And you did it. So from here on out, you're good. You're golden. Like, that was telling me that if I really wanted to stop drinking, I could. And so fortunately she said yes, by the grace of God. And then, as we're going through, we went for my bachelor party, we went to Miami, Florida, which is probably the worst mistake of my life. I mean, we still talk. The other day, my friend and I, my best friend, my best man, we were talking about it the other day, and he was like, "Do you remember going to this place?" I was like, "Dude, what?" Like, we did not. Like, it was, I mean, of all places for a recovering addict and alcoholic to go, or an addict and alcoholic in any way to go, Miami, Florida is not the right place to go. I'll tell you that. And trust me, I don't ever want to go back. So, and so we went there, and it was a mess. It was a mess. I spent $1,000 on cocaine in a matter of 24 hours. It was just, I mean, it was unbelievable. And I kept the whole thing a secret from my wife too. Like, she knew we were in Miami. She knew that we were drinking, but she had no idea to the extent at one point. And there was a point where, I'd stayed up for 24 hours and I went to sleep, and I slept for like 12 hours on my bachelor trip. So now I'm stuck in bed while my bachelor party, the guys that I brought here to celebrate me getting married, are out on their own drinking and partying by themselves. I'm asleep in a bed. My wife has no idea what's going on because she hasn't heard from me. It was a mess. Like, let's just say I woke up to a blown up phone that was not a good, there were not some, it was not good. So then I got back, man, from bachelor party, and it was, it just took over. It really just got worse from there. And, that's when the methamphetamine started kicking back in. And it was to an extent where it was an unhealthy amount, of drugs and alcohol at that point. And that's kind of when the rock bottom started hitting. That's really when I started digging for rock bottom, and I had already hit rock bottom, and I was still trying to dig, man. I'd painted myself into a corner, and I was running out of colors, and I was trying to paint more with just water. I was going to force it. I was going to prove to myself that I could do it, even though I wasn't. And so she went on her bachelorette party, and she came back. And when she came back, she was diagnosed with COVID at the time. And I remember that was just my excuse to be like, okay, she's going to be quarantined in bed for a few days. As long as I keep bringing her food, and I keep her, keep her temperature down, and I keep giving her medicine, I can do whatever I want out here, because she's not allowed out in the living room. And man, it was not good. There was a lot of things that were done that she had no idea about. And then one day, she woke up, and she looked in my eyes, and she had asked me straight up. She said, "Have you been doing drugs again?" And there was a moment in my mind that I was like, tell her no. But then there was also a moment in my mind that was like, you can't say no. This isn't a chance. You have to say yes. And I believe that was my higher power speaking to me, over me that day. And that was my step one experience. That was the greatest step one experience I've ever had, and I just said yes. And I remember walking outside of our house at the time, getting on my knees and just asking God, like, God help me. Like, and it was more of like a God, I'm back. And it was more of like, okay, God, you've proven to me that I need you in my life. You've proven to me that I am powerless over this stuff, because obviously I can't do this on my own. And I remember the one line that my wife said to me, that sticks out in my head, that is the sole reason why I'm sober today. She asked me, what are we going to do? And it wasn't, what are you going to do? It was, what are we going to do? And that was the moment that I realized, okay, this is the one, obviously, and two, this is my higher power, not only speaking through me, but through her as well, telling me, hey, you've got somebody on your side here that's willing to go to any length for you. It's time for you to go to any length for you. And that was something I've never done. That was something that I had never really even explored, was accepting myself for who I am and doing anything for myself. I always did everything for everybody else. I always did everything to fit in so that other people like me. I never did anything so that I could like myself. That was a crucial moment in my sobriety. And I remember she asked me that, and I kind of blacked out, man. I really don't even remember the conversation. I just remember saying, I need to go to a meeting. I need to get back in the rooms. And sure enough, that night I went to a meeting down the road in Dripping Springs. And I remember sitting there that night, and they call out for the desired chip. And I was hesitant to get the desired chip because I still wasn't sober at that time. I was still coming down off of a methamphetamine high. And before that, on the way to the meeting, I still had a bag of methamphetamine thrown out the window. And even to this day, like, my mind's still like that blows my mind right there, because you'd asked me 3 years ago to throw out a bag of methamphetamine out the window because I didn't need it anymore. I would have told you you're crazy. There's no way. There's no way I would have the self-will, the power to do that, because I felt like I needed that to live. And so I remember sitting there in the meeting, and they asked for it. And I said, I would like one, but I don't think I deserve one right now. And I remember a guy looked at me and he said, if you're here, you deserve one, no matter what. So I picked up that shit, man, and I looked at it like this, and I just started, the tears. I was crying so hard, and it was the first real good cry that I had had in years. And you could have filled up a 5-gallon bucket with the amount of tears that were coming down my face at that moment. And there was tears of guilt, there were tears of embarrassment, there were tears of joy. Like, it was every mixed emotion that a human body has, mixed into one act. And it was just cry, let it out, and that's when I realized that I was home. That's when I realized that I was finally in a place where people accept me for who I am. I was finally in a place where I didn't have to try and fit in. I was finally at a place where I could walk into these rooms, sit down, and just be okay with whatever circumstance or whatever situation or whatever it is. I could be okay with whatever was happening at that moment, as long as I was in that place. And I remember walking out of that meeting, man, and it was just like, I walked out of that meeting and it was almost like I was, walking into the gates of heaven, dude. Like, it was just like a big golden gate was almost in there. It was like, I found what I finally need. And then there was that regret of like, dude, like, I've been here before, I've done this before. And I knew going into the meeting, I knew what to expect. Like, I knew that we were about to read the big book. The 4-step was definitely on my mind. The amends were definitely on my mind. Like, I knew everything about recovery and what was going to happen and what the next few, days were going to look like. Like, I knew the next few weeks were going to be rough. But it was, when I walked out of there, I was just like, I'd never felt that feeling before in rehab. I'd never felt that feeling before in a meeting. And so that was definitely a spiritual experience of mine, was just, walking out of there. And I've got a little baggie that I keep all my chips in. And they're right by, I've got a picture, right by my alarm clock. That's the Serenity Prayer. My baggie of chips is sitting right there in front of it. And it's just a little daily reminder of, look where you started and look where you are now. And for me, it's, I know some people in recovery, like, they don't like the chips, and, there's obvious, and that's what I love about recovery, is that there's so many different views of it that work. Like, there's no just one right or wrong way to do it. Like, it's your program. Like, if whatever works for you, works for you. And that's what I was looking for. I was looking for something that, that I could do on my own, the way I wanted to do it, but it still helped me, because I had done everything on my own anyways, but none of it helped, but this time it was, if I want to keep these chips for myself, I can keep these chips for myself. If I want to pass them off to a sponsee one day, I can pass them off to a sponsee one day. but I don't have to do any of that. What I have to do is I have to wake up and I have to admit that I'm powerless over this disease. And for me not to admit that is just, is naive, because I've proved to myself that I'm powerless over this alcohol, like over this disease. I've proved it to myself. So for me to wake up one day and just say, no, I think I can do it today, that scares me. If I wake up one day and I think about that. But that's another thing I love about this program, is that there are going to be days where I wake up and there's that little disease, that little devil on my shoulder talking to me, hey man, one hit or one beer today is going to be good. You can go do it. I can look up at my alarm clock and say, God grant me the serenity to accept things I cannot change. And boom, there it is. Like, there's a step one right there. Like, there's something so simple that I can do, that can just get me to that next hour at least, and if I have to say the serenity prayer 24 hours a day, I have to do it. But, it's not easy, but it's simple, and that's my, right now in my recovery, my whole goal is to, spread awareness on what people are going through in recovery. Because it's, whether you're 3 years sober or 30 years sober or 3 days sober, it's a battle every day. And it's tough, but it's very rewarding. I'll tell you that. So that's kind of went on a rampage there, man. But, that's really the glimpse of, where it started. It really took off when I was in my 20s, the addiction, the alcoholism.
No, that was great. It's super cool to hear your story. You said so much stuff that I can relate to. I also came into recovery on probation. I was in drug court. I was forced to be in rehab, and I think we come in for a lot of different reasons, but I loved how you kind of mentioned, like, when you were doing it for you, and you just knew that meeting something was different, It's like, do you think that was you kind of just surrendering? Are you like, okay, like, I'm all in on this?
For sure, man. That was, and now that I think about it, like, it was definitely a serenity moment, and it was my first surrender moment, honestly, now that I think about it, because I didn't surrender the first time. The first time, it was like you said, like, I was court ordered to rehab, so I was forced to go to rehab. I was told, like, hey, you can go to rehab, you can finish probation, and then we'll get off your back. So that was my so on and so forth surrendering. No, I'm just here to get the law off my back, so I don't have anybody looking over my shoulder anymore. At this time, it was all natural. Like, it was solely my higher power telling me it's this, or it's the same thing that you're still doing, and which one do you want? And really at the time, it was sobriety and your wife and a beautiful life ahead of you, or addiction and nothing else. And that was basically the two choices that I had. And I'm a huge family man. I had a lot of goals that I wanted to set, that I just wasn't achieving. And at the time, I really didn't feel like life was bad. But then when she asked me, what are we going to do? That was the first step to me really achieving those goals, which was marry somebody, buy a house, and build a family. Those were my three goals that I wanted, because growing up, my family, like, we were so close, like, and I've got a younger sister, and my mom and I and my dad, and like, it's like, I grew up in a very close knit family. And so I wanted that of my own. And I just thought that was going to naturally happen one day. And so, when my wife asked me that, it was just like, okay, dude, like, this is the first step to achieving your goals that you want in life. And you have a choice right now. I can either keep going straight, or I can veer off, and I can take the right, and I can take the road less traveled, because there are a lot of people that don't take this road. And I can either join them, or I can surrender, and I can say, no, I'm done with this. And I really think that was the first time that I ever really surrendered to anything. Honestly, like, I was not somebody to say that you were better than me. I was not somebody to say that I needed help. Like, that was not who I was. Like, I was going to figure it out no matter what it took. I was going to beat myself dry. I was going to beat myself down to the bone. Like, I would tear my own skin off just to figure out what is going on. And at that point, it was that moment of just like, okay, like, I can't figure this out anymore. And I was so overdone with the mental strength that I was having to take, or having to have, on just having to hide everything, having to pretend like I'm perfect, pretend like I'm okay. And man, there was feelings that I was feeling inside that I didn't even know that I had. And I remember walking out of that meeting, I was like, okay, like this is something, like I'm getting the chills right now just thinking about it. And it was just like, and I remember everybody coming up to me and they were, it's that cliche saying, like, I don't know anybody in these rooms, and I'm talking to these people like I've known them for 50 years. And it was like, as I'm listening and I'm listening to their stories, I'm like, man, that sounds like me. Man, that sounds like me. Like, hold up, like you're 50 years old. I'm 26. Like, how can we be the same? Like, you're almost 30 years older than I am. Like, what is that? Like, what is this? And that was something that I never experienced in rehab. And my sponsor, at the time, I'd gone, when I first walked out of that room, I knew that I needed to get a sponsor. I knew that was the one thing that was going to save me. So I found a sponsor that night at that meeting. And I started working with him, and I dove into the book. Like, I got right to it because I knew what needed to happen and I knew what I needed to do. But at the time, like, I was making sure, I told myself, make sure that we're doing this to get sober, and you're not doing this because you know how to do it already. And that was a big thing that I really had to watch myself on, is like, okay, why am I doing this right now? Am I doing this to really get sober? Or am I doing this because I know that I need to read the first 164 pages, and I know I need to get to a 4-step, and I know I need, like, am I checking this off as a box, or am I doing these daily? Am I waking up practicing 1, 2, and 3? Am I waking up doing a 10-step call? Like, am I doing these on a daily basis, or am I just doing them to say, okay, yep, I've done that today. Yep, I've done that today. Because that's what I did the first time, was I looked at the steps as a checkbox, and as okay, I woke up, I said I'm powerless. All right, check number 1 off, and then 4 hours later, I'm drinking a beer again. Like, okay, like, no. And so this time I really started working with my sponsor, and then he didn't work out. And there was a counselor of mine in rehab, and he saved me from walking out of rehab at one point. And I got caught stealing a bunch of cigarettes, and these guys bombarded me, and I was in the middle of Texas, in the middle of nowhere. My sponsor pulls up in a car. It's freezing rain. I'm in a cutoff sleeve. I'm in clothes that don't fit. And he's like, "Where are you going?" I was like, "Dude, I'm going to get high. Like, I can't do this anymore." He's like, "You don't even know where you are." And again, there was that moment of, like, challenge accepted. Like, I told myself, like, okay, like, watch this. Like, I'll go find a place to get high real quick. But something took over me, and I got back into his car and I drove back. So he saved my life then. So as I'm getting back into this second time, he's living in the area that I'm in, and his name keeps popping up in my head. Go to Frank, go to Frank, go to Frank. And I didn't want to. I really didn't. There was still a lot of guilt. There was still a lot of embarrassment. There was still a lot of shame, even though I had just walked out of this meeting with all these people who accepted me. And to me, one of the hardest things that I've had to witness for myself is walking back into the rooms after a relapse, is going back to those rooms. Like, to me, that takes more balls of steel than to get sober in the first place, to be able to walk back into the rooms and say, all right, I'm back, like, let's try this again. Because a lot of people, they don't do that. They don't understand that, just because I failed once doesn't mean I can succeed again. I've failed many of times in my life, and I had to remind myself that, is, like, okay, yeah, I failed at this the first time, but that doesn't mean I can't succeed the second time, or the third, or the fourth, or however many times it takes. But there was still, like, I was embarrassed to call him. And so I'd gone through 3 sponsors, in this time, in a matter of, a month and a half, 2 months. And I finally called him, man. I picked up the phone one day and I said, "Man, I need help again." And I remember his remark was, "Man, I thought you were sober this whole time." And in my mind, I was like, yes, like, goal achieved. Like, there were certain people and places that I didn't want to associate with, because I knew that they knew that I needed to be sober. They were sober. And so I knew that if I interacted with them, they were going to be like, "How's your recovery going?" And I would be like, "What recovery? Like, there is no recovery." Like, like, there was that feeling. And so when he said that, I was just kind of like, oh my gosh. And it was just more eye-opening to me of, of how much effort I really put into hiding my disease, and how much effort I really put into masterminding a plan to be able to drink and use. And that meant like I had to avoid certain places, certain people, like, and it was just like, it was a lot of work, man. Like it was so draining. And I didn't realize how draining it really was. Like I didn't realize how much effort I'd put into not into like avoiding people, and that's not who I am. Like I'm a very personal person. Like I love to talk. My mom always says that I can make friends with a brick wall. Like that's just who I am. Like I'm one of those guys. And so the fact that I was putting so much effort into not being that person, there was that moment of like, okay, like who are you? This whole time, like you wanted to be able to accept you for you. And like, you're not. Like you're being the complete opposite of who you really are. Like the person that you are is the guy that can talk to anybody, that is not afraid to go anywhere, that is not afraid to talk to any stranger, like whatever it is. Like I was living I was sober, but I was still living that like Jekyll and Hyde life of like, I had that mask on. And so I finally called him, and he said that. I was like, all right, man, you know what we need to do? No. And so he ran me through the steps. We did a 4-step. We got to 5, 6, and 7. And then I got to 8, and I started making amends, man. And that's when my life really changed. Like it was wild, man. Cause I didn't make amends the first time. That's the step that I really, bailed out on, was the amends. Cause I was like, man, screw that. Like, like, I don't want to do that. And this time, like it was, the first amends that I made was to my wife, obviously. And that was a emotional night. But it was definitely a turning point in our life. And at that point we were engaged. And so we were fixing to get married, and I was like, okay, I need to make these amends before our wedding. I really do. I need to make these amends before our wedding. I need to make these amends before I say my vows, because if I say my vows without making amends, to me, that was like, I was honestly lying to her. If I didn't clean my side of the street before I made those vows. And so, I made amends to her. And she was brought back. There was a moment there where she was silent, and I asked her, like, what can I do to make this right? I'm willing to do anything. And I remember she just told me, she just said, keep going to meetings and stay sober. And so that was the moment that I was like, okay, I'm in. Like, and I was in, like, I was all in at that point. But when she said that, I was like, there we go. There's my ticket. That was as if somebody had just punched my ticket into the show. I was like, okay, I've made it. I'm right where I need to be. This is what I need to do. This is who I am. I finally had found who I was at that moment. And so I remember, making the amends, and then it was like, from there, dude, it was a roller coaster of events in a good way. I remember my 30 days sober. I'm gonna backtrack here. Sorry. 30
Oh,
days.
no, go ahead.
This is really when I realized that I really was an addict and alcoholic, because my 30-day sober day, I got my 30-day chip. The meeting had ended at 7:30. And I got my 30-day chip, man, and I wanted to go celebrate not drinking for 30 days by drinking. I wanted to go to the bar, and I wanted to be like, oh, look at this. Like, I haven't drank for 30 days. Like, woo. And I remember calling my wife, and I said, I need to go to another meeting. And she was like, what do you mean? And I was like, I need to go to another meeting. And I remember she had texted me back, and she said, you really want to celebrate not drinking by drinking? And I responded back. I said, yes, I do. This is why I need to go to a meeting. And she said, okay. She said, I love you, and call me afterwards. So I went to another meeting, man, right after there. And, I went in there and sat in the meeting. I shared where I was at that point. I said, y'all, I said, if you really don't think that you're an addict and alcoholic, I'm living proof right now, because I just picked up this 30-day chip, and I want to go celebrate this 30-day chip by going to drink. And that was a turning point in my sobriety right there. That was a turning point. And before that day, I remember I had to talk with my sponsor, man, because I really thought I was depressed, because I was everything was great in my life. Everything was, that pink cloud was right above me, man. Everything was starting to turn out. Every work was good. I had just gotten a promotion. My wife was finally loving me again. Like there was I wasn't walking on eggshells anymore, but I felt depressed. So I called my sponsor and I said, man, what is going on, dude? Like I'm 30 days sober. Everything's great. Life is good now, but why do I feel depressed? And I remember he told me, he goes, cause you're so happy that your mind doesn't know what to do with itself right now. There was emotions that I was feeling that I hadn't felt ever before in my life. And it was joy. It was happiness. It was fulfillment. It was, progress. It was succeeding. It was like all of the positive emotions that one feels when you do something great for yourself that I had never felt before. And I was feeling it again. And it was my mind was telling me this is not okay. What is going on? Man, I was looking at a psychiatrist. Like I was about to go to the doctor and get my levels tested. Like I didn't know what was going on, dude. And I remember he told me, he said, you're so happy that your body and your mind doesn't know what to do with itself right now. And I said, so is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? Like, what's happening? And he was like, well, you tell me. And I remember sitting there and I was like, okay, like this is the physical and the spiritual change that they talk about. Like I am changing to the person that I want to be, dude. And it just blows my mind that finally at one point in my life, I was so happy in my life that my body didn't even know what to do. Like that's how happy I was. Like it was an amazing moment. And then the 30-day thing happened and that was the first spiritual experience that I had. That was another step one, surrender. That was a moment that I told myself, I said, okay, if you don't believe that you're an addict and alcoholic, look at what's in your hand right now. Look what happened tonight. If there's ever a chance that you don't think you're an addict and alcoholic, think about tonight. And that was massive. That was a massive breakthrough for me. And that's really when that's when that pink cloud, it faded away, but it was still off in the distance. I knew it was there because it was like, my wife and I finally got married. We got married in December. So I was about 4 months, 3.5, 4 months sober. And funny story with that, man, our wedding was a dry wedding. And I remember when we first got engaged, I wasn't sober. And my wife asked me, what do you want at the wedding? And my response was, I don't care as long as there's beer. That was my response. And a year and a half later, we're at our wedding. It's a dry wedding. Like there was not a single drop of alcohol within our reach at all. It was one of the best nights of my life. I was definitely nervous going into that night because the guys that the guys that were in my bachelor party, they're not alcoholics. Some of them are heavy drinkers, but they're not alcoholics. And so I was nervous. There was that moment of like, okay, are they going to still want to do this? And there was like, throughout my life, I always go back to whenever I was a little kid of like, okay, are they going to accept me for who I am? Or do I need to change for them? And that's a really big character defect of mine, even to this day, and so there was that thought in my head, like, oh, are they going to be okay with this? But then my sobriety took over and it was like, who cares? If they don't want to be there for you because there's no alcohol, then they're not meant for you. Like they're not really who they say they are. And honestly, all of them showed up. We all had a great time. We had a great wedding. It was a wonderful night. My wife and I, we went on our honeymoon after that to Punta Cana, in an all-inclusive resort. And it was like, I was sitting there, man, in the resort and it's all-inclusive. So everything is free. There's guys getting hammered left and right. And I didn't even think about it. Like, it was just like, it was a spiritual experience again that I was like, man, if I was drinking right now, and it's an inside joke with my wife and I now. Every time we go to an event, she always, either one of us asks us, can you imagine if you were drinking right now? And I'd be like, well, which table would I be on top of dancing? Like, how much money would we have spent tonight if I was actually drinking? And the fact that we can joke and laugh about that now, just really proves to me that, I've really accepted who I am. I've really accepted that I'm an addict and alcoholic, man. And I've never been happier to say that I'm an addict and alcoholic. Like I love it. Like it's fulfilling, and it still gives me that sense of like I'm different because there's, even though, there's quite a few of us out there, like it's something that I have to go through that nobody understands besides the people in the rooms, and it's like a special club almost, like the one percenters, like that's who we are, dude. Like, and I love it. I absolutely love it. So
Yeah, there's so much I could relate to with that, man, especially the getting 30 days and wanting to celebrate it. It's like, I mean, that is like the perfect definition of like alcoholism, in my opinion, because I've felt that way where it's like, look, I've proven to you guys or myself for a period of time that I can, if I need to, handle my drinking. So now I'm good to now drink, and I've been through that same exact thing. And that's cool, man. It sounds like that was like a cool breaking point for you as well.
yeah.
One of the other experiences. And I want to ask you too, because there's a lot of people, a lot of couples that are in sobriety, recovery together. How do you guys kind of manage like making sure that your marriage is good along with like your own recovery stuff? Do you guys mix? Like, you guys go to the same meetings? How do you kind of balance all that out?
So that's a good question, man. That was definitely a struggle at first when I first got sober because my wife really didn't know. She's a normie, and she really didn't know what was about to happen. And I just remembered her. I remember telling her, "Hey, the next 2 weeks to 3 months, my life is going to be strange. It's going to be hell, but it's also going to be great. I just need you to support me in everything that I do." And she had no problem with that, obviously. That's why we were there. And I remember there were nights that I would come home. And I remember one night she asked me, she said, "So do you have to go to a meeting once a week for the rest of your life?" And I told her, I said, "Who knows? Who knows? For right now, I need to go to as many meetings as I'd mentioned Al-Anon to her. She wasn't really a part of it. Like, she really wasn't about that. And to be honest, my wife hasn't had a drink since I got sober. She really hasn't. I think that's a big key in it. Is the fact that she kind of joined the same lifestyle as me, just in a different route, really. So now there's, I see a lot of people that come into the rooms that their significant other drinks as well. And, they share in meetings about like, well, my husband ran out a bottle of whiskey last night and it looked really good. And I'm just like, in my mind, like with the way my wife is with me, I'm like, man, like I couldn't imagine if she busted out like a bottle of whiskey right in front of me. Like, I just couldn't do it. Like, I don't understand. And this is kind of where our Sobersun came from. This was her idea. In fact, I was at a University of Texas football game. It was the third quarter, and she had texted me, "Next business adventure, we're going to do this." And I was like, bingo, let's do it. Yeah. And so it's just like, and I think it's kind of opened her mind as well to a little bit of people around us as well, as like, like, okay, like there are people in alcoholism and addiction that, that suffer a battle every day. And so I really think the big thing that we deal with a lot is the time that it takes for me, for the meetings and sponsees and phone calls. And, because I tell her all the time, the biggest fear of mine, I've always had this fear, is my phone being on silent at 3 a.m. in the middle of the night and somebody calling me, needing my help, and I'm not going to be able to answer the phone. So I keep my ringer on. I never put it on Do Not Disturb. I have the annoying duck sound. She gets mad. She hates it. She always tells me, "Can you just put it on Do Not Disturb?" And for some reason, like, there's just a huge fear of mine of the night that I'm actually, and I saw a quote the other day. It said, "Be a 3 a.m. friend, not a 3 p.m. friend. Be a friend that somebody can call at 3 a.m. that's going to answer the phone and help you." And I was like, boom, that's who I am. That's what I want to do. I want to help people, whether they need help or not. And so I think just her kind of asking the questions was good for her to understand. I also see a lot of people where they become a lot more distant when one gets sober and one doesn't, because the other one doesn't know what the other person's going through. And there's some nights where I come home and my wife asks me all the time, "How was your meeting, babe?" And I tell her everything about the meeting. "Oh, it was good. We talked about this. We talked about this. I shared this." Like, I really felt like tonight was a really good meeting. And then there's nights where I get home and she's like, how was your meeting? And I was like, it was fine. And I think that's where the line is, where, there was a time at the beginning where she would just, I don't want to say pressured me, because she wasn't pressuring me. She was just trying to find out more information, right? She wanted to find out as much information about me and my sobriety, what it took for me to get sober, so that she could help me the most. And so there was the beginning when I would come home and I wouldn't talk about my meetings, she would kind of dig deeper and she'd be like, well, what'd you talk about? Did you share? Like, and it was kind of annoying. Like, it really was like, I was and there were some nights where I was just like, you don't want to know what I shared tonight. Like, I promise you that, like, I'm going to have to make another amends if I tell you what I shared tonight. But anyways, and then, and then there was, and she, and then there was one day where we had what I call a relapse talk. She asked me, she goes, what would we do if you relapsed? What would you do? What would I need to do if you came home and you were drunk? And I was just like, whoa, like, I never thought about that. Like, I never thought about to tell her, like, hey, if I do come home and I'm obliterated or you find out that I'm drinking, like, this is what we need to do. So I told her, I was like, look, here's my sponsor's number. You need to call him. You need to get my ass to a meeting, call somebody in Alcoholics Anonymous. Like, I laid it out there. Like, I just gave her the information that she needed, the tools. Like, they give me the tools that I need to stay sober. I gave her the tools for her to keep me sober as well. And it's funny because my disease tells me, like, well, dude, you screwed yourself now. Like, you're never going to be able to drink again. Because if I come home and I'm drunk, like, she's either going to send me to rehab or she's going to send me to my sponsor or she's going to send me to a meeting, and it's just that sense of accountability. I really think that's probably the biggest thing, is the accountability, is having her hold me accountable for my actions, and her telling me, like, hey, like, what you said a while ago was not okay. Like, because there's times where I say stuff and I'm like, oh, shouldn't have said that. And she'll tell me, like, or even if it's her telling me to go to a meeting, like, there's some weeks, I usually go to one meeting a week. I'd share a meeting on Monday. It's a beginner's meeting, in this area. And there's some weeks where I can't make a meeting. And I'll have to go like 2 weeks without it. And, like, dude, I can sense it. Like, me not going to a meeting once a week, and I'm 3 years into this thing. Like, I have to go to a meeting once a week. I have to. It's just part of my recovery that I have to. Like, I know people that haven't gone to a meeting in 7 years and they're sober and they live a really great program. And they live a really great life. And to me, like, I just can't do that. I have to go to a meeting, and there are some times where she tells me, like, don't you think you should probably go to a meeting? And I'm like, okay, all right. If my wife is telling me that I need to go to a meeting, like, might need to get my ass to a meeting real quick. Like, and so I think it's just her, like, knowing what this takes, and knowing the knowledge about recovery, which is kind of that is our goal with our brand, our logo, our store, Sobersun, is to just really spread awareness and information about recovery, and resources about recovery, of just, like, and basically just let people know, like, man, you're not alone. Like, you're not alone. There are a lot of people that are in recovery. And then there are a lot of people that are affected by people in recovery. And I think that's huge. I think that's huge for people to understand, to know. Because I remember when I came in, like, the first time, it was just like, I felt so secluded. I felt like there was just a small percentage of the world that was in recovery. Like, I was like, oh, great. Like, I'm one of them now. And now, as I've gone into this and I've really gotten deeper, like, man, like, there's people that I've known for 10 years that have been in recovery for 15. And I'm like, dude, what? Like, holy moly. Like, it's amazing. And the fact that I can travel to, out of state somewhere, and I can pull up on an app and it can tell me a meeting that's within 100 miles of me. And I can go to a meeting right then and there, whether I'm in Texas, Kentucky, Louisiana, wherever it is, I can always find a meeting somewhere. And that just tells me, like, that's 50 states that there's at least one meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's at least one person that is in recovery in 50 states. That is at least 50 other people that are in recovery besides me. And to me, that's just mind blowing. Like, that's just, it's not a small group. There are so many people in recovery out there. There are so many people that are in sobriety. and we really, in this world, dude, like, to me nowadays, this world is it's almost like forcing us to be alcoholics. Like, when COVID hit, like, now you can press a button and you can have alcohol delivered to your front doorstep. Like, I was sponsoring a kid one time who was 16 and he was addicted to fentanyl. Like, that was his drug of choice. And it was just like, just the awareness that needs to be, to me, that needs to be spreaded about, if you have somebody in your life that's involved in recovery, the instant reaction is just to give up on them and just say, okay, they have no hope. They're done. Like, screw them. Like, we don't want any part of them anymore. Rather than, set the boundaries and just let them know, like, you're struggling right now and you're at rock bottom, but this isn't the only place that you can go. Like, you can go up from here. Because there was a point in my life where I didn't feel like I could go up anymore. I felt like the only place that I could go was further and further down. And I really tried. I really tried to get further and further down in my life and see how far down I could go. Until my wife asked me, what are we gonna do? And I got back into the rooms, and that was it. Like, that was my moment of like, okay, this is possible. I can do this. I just have to want to do it. And that's the thing is nobody can get me sober. Nobody can want me to get sober. As long as if I don't want to get sober, I'm not going to get sober. If I want to get sober and I want to stay sober, I'm going to stay sober and I'm going to get sober. That's the biggest thing right there.
Yeah. How did you guys come up with the name for Sobersun?
It was my wife's idea, man. She, the son is it's basically, we didn't want to go down the Christian route because we know there's slippery slopes with that in AA, obviously. And so it was more of like, I'm a sober son. That's it. Like, I'm a sober son. My mom, like, my mom's a big part of my recovery as well. And it was just, and the son, like, I'm a son of my higher power, whatever higher power that is, I'm a sober son. And that was kind of the logo really wasn't it. Like, that wasn't the difficult part. Like, she had this bright idea and it was just like, and I remember her telling me, she was like, well, what if we did this? I go, no, what else? We're going to do this. And I believe, like, that's where my addict alcoholic mind took over. It's like, okay, I want this to happen and I'm going to make it. Like, there was that moment of like, yes, here we go. Like, and it was just boom, floodgates open. And I remember a guy named Frank Parisi. He just wrote a book called Embrace Abundance, actually. Great guy. I remember asking him one time in the gym, I said, does this get any easier? Talking about sobriety. He just he laughed at me and I was like, okay, all right. And he looked at me and he goes, it doesn't get easier, but it gets manageable. I said, okay. And he said, but the thing about us addicts is the way our mind works is that if we want something, we're going to go get it and we're going to make it happen. So I've really kept that in my mind of, if I want something to happen, I'm an addict. Like, if I didn't have any money or I didn't have any place to go or I didn't have anything and I wanted to get high or drunk, I was going to find a way to do it. I was going to go to any length to do it. So now I've rewired my brain and I'm continuously rewiring my brain to a positive way to think that, okay, I want to spread awareness of sobriety and recovery and let people know that they're not alone and that there's other people out there. I'm going to make that happen. I'm going to do whatever I can. I'm going to go to any length to do that. And it's also going to help me stay sober as well, because there's that sense of the 12 step, carrying the message to another alcoholic, and that's the whole goal, is just to carry my message and to carry our message as a family, and to let people know, like, look, man, like, it's possible. Within a year of me being sober, I got married, bought a house, a beautiful daughter. We've got another one on the way as well. And none of this would have happened if I didn't get sober. My wife is a stay-at-home mom now. Like, that's something that I could never have dreamed of. I'm 29, and I've accomplished a lot in my life so far. And like, I have to be okay with that, and I have to accept that, and I have to tell myself, good job every now and then. So for me to start this company, my wife and I, this is our chance just to kind of, put it out there as like, hey, like, the sentence that really pops up into my mind when I'm talking about this is recover out loud. Like, I want to recover out loud so that other people can see that recovery is a thing and recovery is amazing. It's awesome. It's a miracle. It's done wonders for me. It's done wonders for my wife because, our relationship has changed just because I got sober. It's helped me be a better husband. It's helped me be a better father. It's helped her be a better wife. It's helped her be a better mother. Like even though I'm the one that's going through the recovery, it's changed every aspect around me, including my mother, including my father, both my father, my biological dad, and my stepdad, my stepmom, my mom, like everything around me has just changed, like in a great way. The flower is finally blossomed through. And it's more of that first flower blossomed through, and now I'm just planting more seeds around it to give it a full. And that's really the idea with Sobersun, is just to, and it's an online merchandise store, but we're going to take the proceeds and I want to give them back to local rehab facilities or local recovery businesses. And just in my mind, like, that gives me a chance to go to these places and let the people know that are in rehab and say, like, look, man, I was where you are. Like, I've been where you're at. I've been to rehab. It is possible. It's scary. That's just another chance for me to be of service to somebody. And I just want to give back to these places because, there's so many good people that work in rehab, that work in sobriety, that don't get a lot of credit for what they do. And what they do is tough. It's tough to be able to stay sober and work in that environment as well. I really think that is one of the toughest jobs out there, is to be able to stay sober while working with people that aren't sober. I think that's the temptations and the trauma that happens from those events and those conversations that I can't imagine what they have. Like, it's just, I know there'd be a lot of people on my four-step if I worked in a facility like that, or, an organization like that. Like, so it's just my way of giving back to the workers, the employees, and also the patients, just letting them know, like, hey man, like, you don't know me, but I'm here to help. Even though you don't know me, I'm here to help. Because when I first walked in those rooms the second time around, there were people in there that didn't know me, but they wanted to help. And they did. And there's some people that are still in that meeting that I go to that were there for day one, and there's some people that aren't, and that's just the way it is. That's recovery, unfortunately. So yeah.
That's awesome, man. Hey, dude, I appreciate it. It's super cool. I think that's a great idea with the name, the concept, the idea, like everything you guys are doing with showing people, like I said, the recovering out loud and showing people that it's possible. It's one of the biggest things we can do. It's like, that was something I realized about recovery, is like, it was so weird because this disease that I always saw as like worst thing in the world, and made me this bad person and made me do all these negative things. All of a sudden I got sober and I got introduced to recovery, and it's like, all of a sudden that crazy disease gave me a purpose, and it's like, now all of a sudden I can and reach out to other people, and the same thing that just, brought me to that rock bottom and like you talked about, has given me that drive to kind of, it's like the same drive we use to get high and lie about it and hide it and drink and sneak around, like you had mentioned earlier. It's like we take that same drive and convert it over to recovery, and all of a sudden that's when all the good stuff starts happening. Where do they where can they find your stuff at?
So there's the website is called shopsobersun.com. It's online. You can just type in shopsobersun.com. We also have an Instagram page, sober_sun_. And again, we've got all kinds of stuff. We've got merchandise, as in coffee cups, tumblers. We've got shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, t-shirts. And it's not just for those in recovery as well. It's those for supporting people in recovery as well. I think one of our biggest hot selling items right now is a shirt that says advocate, encourage, support. I've got one right here, actually. Let's see. And then another one is, we've got one that says I love someone sober. This is the advocate, encourage, support one. We've got another one that says I love someone sober. We've got this one this is probably one of my favorite ones, is the I am enough shirt. Because for me that hit home, because for so long, man, I didn't think I was enough. I really didn't. And then when I found out that I was enough, I didn't know who I was enough for. And now I realize like I'm enough for myself, and that's all I need. I'm enough. As long as I am enough for myself, I'm enough for anybody. And that's it. And if I'm enough for myself and I'm not enough for somebody, then they don't need to be a part of me. They don't, because if they're asking me to change for them, that's my old life. And I don't need to change for anybody else. I need to change for myself if I have to. So, and then we got a bunch of other stuff that, we've got a hat right here that says, the No Hangover Club for the girls, the women. We've got all kinds of stuff. And like I said, it's for those that are in recovery. And then there's some on there that are for people that are just in sobriety as well, that aren't in recovery. And man, it's crazy to think, because when I started this, it was almost like the door opened. And I've had phone calls with people, since we started this, that I've never talked to before in my life. And they've reached out to me and they said, I've got someone in my life that is affected by this. Can you help me? And there have been so many conversations since we launched this company, that I've walked people through, either guys that are in recovery that are dealing with it, or people that are affected by people in recovery. And it's just, that fills my heart up so much, is the fact that I can put this out there and let people know, like, hey, I'm here to help you with this. And they can reach out to me at any time they want and say, man, I'm struggling right now. I got somebody who's struggling, and I can just give them that information, and I can tell them like, hey, this is what I have to offer to you. Take it if you want. But you have my number, man. Give me a call anytime you want. Like, I'm here to help. Like, that's the biggest thing for me, is really the mental health, and just, almost acting as a sponsor to the whole world if they need one, like a temporary sponsor, really. Is, if you need to call me and you need to talk for 30 minutes about how your boss pissed you off today, I'm here, dude. I'm here to talk. Like, that's it. That's all I want. If you're here to, if you want to call me and tell me how much your sponsor pissed you off because he told you to get on your ass about your 4-step, well, I'm gonna get on your ass about doing a 4-step too, man. Like, but that's where the accountability in sobriety and recovery come from. I really think that's a big I think that's a big product of recovery, is being able to say, like, I held myself accountable, and I've got people that can hold me accountable nowadays. That's really what keeps me sober, is accountability, and being able to say, I was wrong, shouldn't have done that. What can I do to help? Or on the other hand, like, hey man, what you're saying right now, I don't like, can we stop right there and can we readjust? And that's all kinds of ways. So like I said, man, we've got all kinds of stuff. We've got, and then like I said, we're going to take the portion of the proceeds. And in December, we plan on giving back to my sponsor's rehab facility called Heartwood Recovery here in Austin, Texas. And I thought that's the least I could do for this man that I owe my life to, who's literally saved my life twice now. So we're going to hopefully provide a holiday meal for them around Christmas time, and just kind of hopefully maybe even share that holiday meal with them, get to sit down and eat with them, and talk to them, and give them a little glimpse of hope on what's on the outside of this disease, and let them know, like, hey man, like, it's not all dark and gloomy. There are sunshine and rainbows in recovery. I promise you that. The 9-step promises that you read every time before or after a meeting, like, those come true. I promise you. Promise. So, but yeah, shop sobersun.com, Instagram page as well. We've got a Facebook page too. But we've got all kinds of stuff on there, man. I'm designing products as all the time. My wife the other day told me, she was like, we can't put too much on there. Like, man, I just want to get on there, man. I just want to, design everything. And I'm hoping to reach a certain crowd, and be able to just put my story out there, and just, hopefully people know that, we're not doing this just to generate revenue. Like, we're doing this to give back to the recovery world. And hopefully we can get to a point where we're donating a substantial amount of money to these rehab facilities, and hopefully we can make a dent in what they do, and help those people, and potentially, create some scholarships or something like that for people when they get out of rehab. Like, there's so many so many visions for us that we have right now, that, I have to tell myself to slow down a little bit, because I'm like, man, I want to do this, this, and this, and this, and this. And I'm like, I got to do this first. Like, I got to take it one step at a time, just like I did my recovery. Like, I can't do step 12 before I do step 4. I can't do step 4 before I do step 1. Got to do step 1, 2, and 3 every day before I can do anything else. So, yeah.
Hey, cool, brother. I've loved listening to your story and
For sure.
your inspiration, man. I love hearing about all your motivation, all the people that you're going to go on to help and that you already are helping. I can totally relate with people reaching out. And I think that's been the biggest thing for me. I am so overpaid with this podcast when it comes to the people that I've met, the connections I have made, and the people that reach out. And it's because, sometimes they don't, you've got a parent whose son or daughter is in addiction, and the parent themselves are not in recovery, and sometimes they don't know who to ask. And all of a sudden they see some post on social media or hear some podcast or whatever, and they think, you know what, like, I don't know who to ask. I'm going to just reach out to this person. Yeah. And I love that, it's so cool.
Yeah, and that's exactly what's kind of happened. I've had people message me through Facebook like, hey, I didn't know that you were in recovery, and while I'm talking to you, can you help me out with this? And it's like, yes. And next thing you know, I'm having an hour phone call with that person every day. Man, I'm talking to a guy right now that, he calls me about once every 3 days. Never met this man in my life, never even seen a photo of him, but he was connected to me through a family friend of mine. They gave me his number. They told me to call him. So I called him, and he was like, my sponsor tells me to call people more. I'm like, well, call me every day, dude. And he calls me probably once every 3 days now. We talk, we go through his stuff. He's on his 4-step right now. He's going to meetings. He's getting into service. And like I said, I've never even seen a picture of this guy. I have no idea what he looks like. I've never met him, but I feel like I've known him for 20 years. I feel like we're best friends already. And that's the miracle of recovery is now my mindset is to the point where I'm helping people to actually help people. I'm not helping people to get something back. Because normally if I were to help you, I'd be like, all right, man, remember this, because 3 years down the road, I'm going to call this chip in and you're going to owe me. Like, that was me. That was who I was, and I think at first when people told me like, get out of self and be of service to somebody, I thought it actually like physically meant going to help somebody. Like, I thought I physically had to go like help an old lady across the street or help somebody move or something like that. But it's like, a simple phone call of just checking in with somebody. Pick up the phone and just say, hey man, how you doing? I'm doing good, dude. How are you? I'm doing great. Call you tomorrow. Sounds good. Boom. Like that. That's, or sending a simple text, a simple happy birthday text. Or today there was a guy that I went to high school with. It's his birthday today. And I just texted him and I said, happy birthday, man. You're an inspiration to me. That was it. And he texted me back. He said, wow, thank you, brother. To me, that's being of service right there. It's just letting people know, like, whether they're an inspiration or whether they're doing a good job, or just letting people know that I'm thinking about them. Hey man, thinking about you today. Hope everything's well. Have a good day. Well, that's it. And that can open up so many floodgates to so many things and so many more opportunities to be of service to people. And that's kind of where my mindset is, I wake up as like, how can I be of service today? Who can I call that I haven't talked to in a while? I coach select baseball on the side, youth select baseball on the side. And I've got a group of 13-year-old boys that every day I send them we have a group text Monday through Friday. I send them a goal to do every day. And it's, whether it's talk to somebody at lunch that you don't normally talk to, or tell a teacher thank you, or tell your mom and dad that you love them and that you're proud of them. Just simple stuff like that, man. I'm trying to, and that's our future generation right there. So I'm trying to let them know, like, hey man, like, getting out of self and being of service is what you need to do. And it's why I'm happy today, because and I can tell when I haven't gotten out of self in a while, because I get grumpy and I get mad and easily irritated. And that's when I pause, when agitated, and I take a step back, like, okay, who have I helped recently? And 9 times out of 10, I hadn't really helped anybody. And sure enough, that's when I'll pick up a phone and I'll send somebody a text. Next thing you know, I'm talking to them for about an hour, and it's a great phone call. And it's, it never fails, man. It never fails. Biggest thing is just picking up that phone, that 1,000-pound phone. Like, feels super heavy every now and then, but once you pick it up, you hang it up, it feels super light after that. So that's huge for me. It's huge in my recovery, is picking up the phone.
Yeah, thank you, man. And I love how you just mentioned it's like there's so many different ways we can be of service, and sometimes it's just like saying hello to someone. I had the same thing when I would hear people talk about service. I thought like there was some extravagant event that I had to take part in or organize or something. And sometimes it's just like saying hello to someone that you don't normally talk to, whatever the case. Mike, I've had you on here for a while, man. I just want to say I appreciate it. I loved hearing your story.
Thank you for the opportunity, man.
Yeah, and best of luck with Sobersun and everything. I'll be in touch with you, man. Appreciate you.
All right, man. Have a good day.
You too, brother. All right, you made it through another episode. Thanks again, and if you'd like to collaborate or come on the show, please email me at thesoberfixpodcast@gmail.com. Have a great day.